if AI products and models continue to be controlled largely by giant corporations and small numbers of actors, it will just recreate and accelerate the current kind of inequalities in society. And I think AI, this new revolution in AI, has the potential to redistribute a lot of that kind of power and influence.
Welcome to Socially Conscious AI, where we showcase innovative AI applications for social good and interview experts and thought leaders shaping the future of AI, with a focus on ethical and inclusive practices. I'm Valencio Cardoso, and I'm here with my co-host, Roman Burkott. Roman, how's it going?
We're thrilled today to welcome Dr. Caleb Sponheim to the show. Caleb is a user experience specialist with Nielsen Norman Group. He's teaching user experience professionals how to use AI to be more productive and effective. A former computational neuroscientist, his expertise includes quantitative user experience research and data science, with a focus on artificial intelligence and extended reality technology. So, Caleb, welcome to the show.
Thanks, y'all. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate you being here, sharing your insights with the rest of us. I want to kind of dive a little bit into your background. As I understand that, you have a background in quantitative research and computational neuroscience.
That's right. So I did my doctoral research, my PhD research at the University of Chicago in computational neuroscience. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about how the brain produces movement, actually. So how those millions and millions of neurons in our head sync up and plan activity such that we can make movement and interact with the world. You could make a movement right now with your hands that you've never done before in your entire life. Just you could do something completely unique that you've never done before. How is that possible? It's because there's unique combinations of activity patterns being made in your head. Even though you have a limited number of brain cells, you can create unlimited patterns. So I was trying to figure out how kind of communities of brain cells collaborate to create unlimited, flexible interactions with the world.
That sounds super complicated and very interesting,
It was a
and
lot of hard work.
and kind of relevant actually now that we're entering this age of AI and Terminator is going to take over.
I worked with algorithms and I collaborated with labs that were doing a lot of kind of the early artificial neural network research. So a lot of the big advances in artificial intelligence actually came from the world of neuroscience. Actually learning how the brain works and learning how brain cells and networks communicate and collaborate and replicating that in silicon. So I rotated in a lab early in my career that was focused on trying to get artificial neural networks to do the same types of tasks that they were getting animals to do. So recognizing patterns on a screen and responding in certain ways. The reason why they were using artificial neural nets then was they could actually look at what the artificial neurons were doing very easily. Instead of with an animal, you can't really do that super well. You can't ask the animal, hey, like, why did you do what you did? Right.
Hmm.
So a lot of the original motivation for this work was, hey, we want to figure out how the brain works. Let's create an artificial system that replicates some of those characteristics, and that can help us learn about what's actually going on in real brains. But in the meantime, that research created a lot of great emergent properties and capabilities for computation and learning that have then been taken forward for, early on, like convolutional neural nets and image recognition. But now all of this generative AI also came from a lot of that same kind of computational neuroscience research.
You mentioned like the word neural network a couple times,
Mhm.
right? That's kind of how we are structuring these AI models, right? They are effectively being called neural networks in our industry.
Yeah, that's the nomenclature. It doesn't perfectly replicate how biological neural networks function, mostly because we still don't know how biological neural networks function. It's not just complicated, but it's complex. So it's not just that there's lots of things happening, but they're all interacting and they're all affecting one another. However, there are characteristics that we've pulled from biological brain cells that enhance these kind of AI capabilities. Things like memory, things like weights, directionality, all of those things, in addition to reinforcement learning, those kind of unsupervised and supervised learning capabilities, a lot of those ideas came from originally computational neuroscience and, well,
Yeah.
computational neuroscience discovering how our brains work.
It's kind of a good sort of level set because while we do use these terms and we are structuring these algorithms in using the same terminology, right? We're nowhere near where the brain works, right? And replicating that
Yeah.
simply because like also don't understand how it
And
works
and
yet,
that maybe
right?
that's not the goal, right? You know, the goal of a lot of AI research now is not necessarily to recreate a human brain in a computer, right? But to do new things, extend beyond, or approach different applications. I think it's totally okay. I think Val, you made a great point, which is it's important not to equate artificial intelligence with biological
Mm.
intelligence. There's a lot of incentives to anthropomorphize, to take what we assume and kind of how we interpret human behavior and just port it over to interpreting artificial intelligence behavior. But there's a lot of mistakes that you can make. Terminology enforces that, right? Calling it neural networks, calling them intelligent, all of these different things. It encourages people, especially when they're interacting with a chat interface like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. They're encouraged to kind of imagine a person on the other side. But we have to remember that these are very, very, very different from biological mechanisms, even though they've been inspired by them.
So you're going from being a researcher, right, to now a UX specialist or user experience specialist, right, with the Nielsen Norman Group, and specifically you're focusing on
Mhm.
AI. What has that journey been from, being a researcher in, in neuroscience and right, quantitative research, to becoming a UX specialist here at the Nielsen Norman Group?
It feels like a smoother arc than it might seem from the outside. One of the reasons I got into neuroscience was actually a user experience problem, if you can believe it. I You may have heard of the company called Neuralink that's founded by Elon Musk and a couple of researchers from University of California, San Francisco. And that company is focused on creating brain-computer interface technology. Way back in 2013, though that type of technology was just starting to get off the ground and was still kind of very much in academic circles. And I was enthralled by it. Brain-computer interfaces, broadly, is a set of technologies that directly read the brain signals of an animal, in many cases humans, and translate that activity directly to some sort of action in the real world. So typically it's movement of a cursor on a screen or the movement of a robotic arm to grasp something, but it just involves the participant thinking about what they want to do and, without having to move a muscle, acting upon the world. That was very exciting to me. It's very easy to imagine what you could do if you could just have direct access to what your brain was doing in any given point in time, right? I was super excited back in 2013 about the possibility of perfect empathy, like, oh, I could feel someone else's pain, or you could translate exactly what you're thinking, or help enable empathy, or help restore people's ability to move through the world or act upon the world, whether from the not ever having that ability or having lost that ability due to injury or something else. It was super exciting to me. So I was like, okay, how do I get into this? How do I do this? And the UX problem here is, if you think about just for a second, most of this technology involves, because of how complicated and complex our brain activity is, it involves putting a chip surgically in our brains, actually putting state-of-the-art kind of series of like sewing needles and threads into our cortex and directly reading it. That's incredibly invasive. It's incredibly intimate, and it creates a relationship and an interface with technology that is the closest it's ever been. I defy you to imagine a human computer interface that's closer than that, right? And I recognized that interface and I was like, okay, that needs to be designed. That needs to be respected. That needs to be governed in a very intentional way. I did human factors research at NASA. I went to the National Institutes of Health and did some research there. I went to grad school and got a PhD in computational neuroscience. And I worked on brain-machine interfaces throughout my graduate studies. Worked on brain-machine interface projects where we directly recorded brain activity from human participants, and they controlled cursors on the screen and virtual reality robotic arms and all of these different things. By the end of that, I was exposed to a lot of the challenges associated with this technology. It also helped me realize the difference between imagining a future and actually realizing it. Because it took me to get into the lab where this work was being done to actually help build these brain-machine interfaces to realize the huge amount of work that's necessary to take things from moving a cursor on a screen to actually creating a product or building a company to make this happen and to make it worth it to install a chip in someone's brain, right? That value add, there needs to be a benefit to having something installed in your brain, right? So long story short, the brain-machine interface world isn't ready for these UX questions and problems. There's a lot of very basic research that needs to be done to understand how the brain works. There's a lot we don't understand about how the brain works that is keeping us from implementing these brain-computer interface technologies. And so I decided to kind of move forward and bring my academic, my quantitative, my research, and my UX expertise and my human factors expertise into the UX world more broadly. And I've found a great home at NNG for that. And it's been really enjoyable to keep thinking about emerging technologies like extended reality, like XR, especially like AI, where there's a lot of similar problems and challenges, where AI is one of those technologies where it's amazing and easy to imagine a gleaming future where the technology is just a little bit better, but it enables so many more capabilities. It's also a very complex technology built on systems and math that we don't understand very well. And it might be kind of difficult to make incremental progress. So that's one of the reasons I'm so interested in AI, because I see a lot of parallels between this neuroscience technology that I left and this new world of AI.
When you were discussing the user experience of a brain-computer interface, I just had this horrifying mental image of like, do you agree with our updated terms of service?
Yeah.
I'm going to mentally click this every day. Yes.
I think of a very prominent tech reviewer, Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, who says, never purchase a product based on the promise of future software updates, right? Never buy into something with saying, oh, it'll get better later on, right? The stakes of that increase enormously when you're thinking about opting for putting a chip in your brain, right? You better make sure it works well when you get it, And you need to have trust that that company will be around for a while, right?
Right.
The longevity of these types of implants have not been solved. Most of them, there aren't any that are high performance and last longer than 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
So there's still a lot of challenges to be navigated with that piece of technology. But you're right, Roman. It is easy to imagine thorny issues that are currently present with software that if we don't even solve those,
Right.
we don't want to port them over to chips in heads.
You want to opt into our marketing emails?
Oh,
No.
Lord. They're going to make it even more difficult to unsubscribe from those, right?
Just call our call center.
You can't put down the phone and walk away. The hold music is in your head constantly. Yeah.
The show is supposed to inspire hope about AI. I think we should move on.
Well, again, like, look, some people have drawn links between brain-computer interface technology and AI, but I believe that the challenges for implementing this technology and improving them are largely separate. There's lots of machine learning applications that help to decode and understand brain activity. I used a decent amount of it in my own doctoral research. But the ways forward for improving our relationship with technology are quite different for BCIs and I believe. And we're already seeing, with the amount of energy and investment and resources being poured into AI, we're seeing a lot of these problems starting to be solved and smoothed over that were they seemed, especially when these algorithms were invented in the 70s, they seemed insurmountable, right? And only recently have we started to make a lot of progress with them. So I'm hopeful in that regard. I would say I'm more optimistic about AI than I am about the future of brain-computer interfaces.
Well, like you said, hopefully those are enabling technologies to each other, right? That they can improve
There's some
in
synergy.
both
There's some
directions.
synergy for
Yeah.
sure. There's an idea out there that in order for us to survive a potential AI apocalypse, we need to have efficient, high-performance brain-computer interfaces to improve our efficiency and our bandwidth for interacting with computational systems to avoid being completely eliminated by Skynet. I don't subscribe to that hypothesis, but if those people want to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at developing brain-machine interface technology, which will help us understand the brain better, then I'm all for that.
You've kind of touched on this interesting world of like where the cutting edge is, right? And your journey's kind of taking you all the way to the cutting edge, and you've brought it back to user experience and research and more practical applications of this simply because like, yeah, there are limitations in AI.
Sure. Yeah. The To contextualize this a little bit, my work at NNG is focused on providing foundational, practical, relevant recommendations for UX practitioners. Our work typically relates to UX workflows, research workflows, responsibilities, challenges that UX professionals have day to day. Our training is focused on helping people solve those challenges in an immediate way. A lot of us are academics at heart, and we love thinking theoretically, conceptually about these issues, and we conduct research to that effect. The way we contribute to the community is by providing those up-to-date, yet grounded recommendations and resources. So the AI course that we developed is part of that. We focus with our AI course on providing practical, it's in the name, relevant resources, knowledge, and recommendations for how UX practitioners can start using AI in their work today. As a result, that type of training and that type of content isn't focused on predictions. I talk about that MKPhD quote in my course. We're not going to be talking about trying to adopt products based on the promise of future developments, because a development coming down the line in 5 years is not going to help me with finishing my journey map, or finishing a design that's due in a week, or conducting a usability test that I have to do tomorrow. But there are applications of AI that can accelerate our jobs and make things more efficient now. It's interesting to see the expectations that people come into the course with, right? Because some people are feeling like they're left out, or they are being left behind and they need to catch up. Some people come in expecting that AI can do a lot more than it can actually do now. And I think that that's no fault to anyone there, because it's very easy to imagine what AI could do. And I think there's a lot of content out there that encourages people to imagine what AI could possibly do, to the extent that we kind of get confused, like, oh, maybe AI can replace my job now, when in reality it can't, but it can work as a coworker, as a co-pilot, as an assistant, as an accelerant for a lot of the work that we do. So those are the things that we focus on now. And of course, the course is constantly updating. The work that we do at Energy is constantly updating to address the improvements in AI over time. And I can talk about some of the things that's already improved just in the couple of months that I've been teaching the course, because it's exciting to be part of something that's changing so quickly. Yet a lot of the foundational advice that we give remains the same.
Well, I would like to dig into that a bit. So, you have a very prominent video available online. I believe it's called AI Isn't Ready for User Experience Design, something along those lines. I was curious, what's going on in the world that video needed to be made? Who are you addressing? What point are you making there?
That is a piece of work that my colleague, Megan Brown, who's a great designer at NNG, and I worked on together. There's an article pairing with it where we wanted to do kind of a status update. We wanted to talk to UX practitioners and designers specifically to see how they're currently using AI in their workflows, and focusing on practical applications. Like, where is AI actually maybe replacing a step in a design workflow, or meaningfully accelerating or enhancing certain steps in UX design workflows? We conducted some contextual inquiry interviews with a number of practitioners, both researchers and designers. With the designers, we identified that there actually weren't many or any design specific AI driven design tools that were being used or fundamentally in workflows. There were people that were experimenting with tools,
Right.
playing with them, poking at them, trying to see the validity of them. But for the vast majority of the designers with which we spoke, as well as the designers within our organization, we found there were no AI-driven design tools that were ready to meaningfully impact the workflows and the practices of UX designers now. And I need to be specific, like, these are for like UX design workflows, not design generally. We're talking about the types of work that UX designers do. So, wireframing, prototyping, graphic design, um, cross-functional communication, conceptualization. Like, a lot of these things aren't meaningfully improved by AI at this point. There are lots of general applications of AI that these designers are using that aren't specific to design, but do improve their work. So I mentioned cross-functional communication. Designers we spoke to say, hey, I love drafting emails with AI. It's easier, or hey, coming up with like a small bit of UX copy, that's super easy for me to ask AI. Getting a little bit of UX copy, very easy to ask an AI to do, whereas it might take me 2 hours to come up with like a little blurb. I know that I can set that aside and hand off that task to, in this particular participant's case, ChatGPT, and that accelerates the work a little bit. But these are general AI tools. These aren't design specific tools. And this was in response to what we were seeing, which was a lot of content and hype and bluster being put out there about people encouraging designers to use AI in their design workflows, even though those tools weren't ready. You do a cursory search on YouTube and you'll find dozens of videos encouraging designers to use Mid-Journey in their UX design or
Right.
image or diffusion-based image generation in UX design. And as someone who's personally kicked the tires on those tools a lot and who has spoken to designers who have tried to use these tools, they do not fit into our workflows.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get a PNG out of these. You don't have tight enough control over many of the kind of the graphic design things. If you try to make icons or small visual assets, they're inconsistent. It's hard to work with them well. The tools that do exist, say within the Adobe Creative Cloud suite, they're often not good enough to start replacing steps that you would normally take. The small example that we found that is somewhat promising is, Adobe does have, say, a tool called text to vector, where you can actually get a vector image, vector object out of using an LLM out of a text prompt. But also, those vectors are not good enough to just take and use. It requires a lot of editing, and you're almost starting from zero. So those are the things that we observed kind of in spring 2024, that there was a lot of pressure for designers to start adopting half-baked tools. And we wanted to do some research to see what designers were actually using. And turns out they're not using very many AI-powered tools in their work.
I was just thinking about what you mentioned earlier about like it doesn't fit in our workflow yet,
Mm,
right? Or it doesn't make sense for our workflow. And I think that's kind of an interesting point because it probably like can scale or apply to any profession out there,
mm.
right? Like, does it make sense to fit within your workflow when you're thinking about leveraging a tool like this, right?
That's a really good point.
And when
Yeah.
do, and when does it make sense to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a universal, like, light switch flip. Just use it or don't use it, right? It's it's a calculation, and there's lots of things on both sides of those calculations. You don't make business decisions in a vacuum. You also think, oh, how long does it take for me to get this answer out of this tool? How much does it cost in terms of time and money, right? Do my company's policies align with the use of this tool? The most fundamental thing is it worth it, right? Is it just worth my time to use this tool in place of something that I would normally do? There's always an opportunity cost, right? Is it going to be faster and better if I just ask a colleague for help with this thing as opposed to using an AI tool? Can I check the validity of an output if I use an AI tool? Do I have the skills and knowledge necessary to validate and verify the output that I'm getting? Now, in terms of a design workflow, that's a little bit different, but there's a lot of questions you need to ask yourself before kind of integrating an AI tool into one's workflow. I am curious, though, both of you having experience in the design world, if I know we're kind of in an AI positive little community right here, but I'm curious about your use of AI in your workflows right now. If you were to kind of set aside maybe the energy that you have to like try lots of stuff, what has stuck for you that you like turn to routinely in your workflows that meaningfully accelerate your work right now?
I think the first use case that you mentioned was where I struggle with, right, is just kind of communicating, right? And like using it to simplify my communication.
Mm.
I use it a lot for that. And it's been interesting because like now I've started to like figure out what my voice sounds like, right? Like
Oh,
tone is becoming important in communication.
yeah.
So like I can see myself getting a little bit deeper from that perspective just because now I'm not limited to spending, 2 hours just figuring out what I want to
Yeah.
say. Now I'm trying to think about like how I want to say it, right? So that's been probably the most powerful way that I've been leveraging it. I haven't found any practical uses in my actual design workflow to give me more
Yeah.
ideas. I still prefer it's almost faster for me to come up with ideas on my own and just sketch it out because there's only so many different ways you can do an interface,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mm. But as part of the nature of our jobs, it's thinking about the user and building applications for users, right? And so a lot of my time is thinking about how to make it useful for other people and where in their workflows can I help them accelerate, kind of similar to what it's doing right now for me when it comes to just communication, right? Like if I'm doing a repetitive task, right? One of my jobs is to like, hey, I need to summarize what I'm saying over here. Like at the point of when a person needs to summarize that, why not just give them a one-click button where
Mm.
they can summarize that or automatically generate that for them? And then they can now go into editing mode as opposed to creative mode, right? Because it takes a lot of computational or brain power to think about that stuff. So now you're all of a sudden spending your energy doing more of the triaging or managing or editing,
Hmm.
right? And suddenly your job has evolved.
Yeah. That's a great point. Roman, do you find any parallels there or any differences in how you engage with AI with your work right now?
Yeah, I'd say largely similar to what Val's talking about. I was all in on text generation right away, and I actually have a journalism background, so writing was never a
Got
challenge for
it.
me, but being finished writing was always a challenge for me, right? So,
Got that perfectionism streak.
well, there is a bit of that. But, just being able to put in a few bullet points and then get out a properly worded email, I mean, that's a no-brainer, something to just jump all over that. I think one of the areas that it's actually been more significantly helpful for me is still text-based workflow, but when I have information, let's call it raw and unstructured, and I have a structure that it needs to go into. So let's say a bunch of nice emails and compliments I've collected over the year, and now my performance review template. I
Mhm.
used to have to, do the mental math of like, okay, should I use this bullet point here or here? And, so being able to feed that into an LLM and say, okay, take this raw information and make it fit that destination. Or for that matter, similar, I've, advised friends to do the same thing with their resume versus the job description. Like,
Right. Right.
I would hear the advice of like, "Oh, every resume you submit should be customized to the job you're applying for." And I was like, even unemployed, I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
But now, if you could take that, okay, here's the job description, here's my, experience, and it does genuinely align, but we're trying to optimize for applicant tracking systems and for keywords and just
Oh,
for
yeah.
overall making it clear how my experience is relevant to the position in question. Probably another example I've shared before is like after running an innovation workshop with a team, you got to send out the after action, like, here's what we did, and here's what we learned, and here's what's
Mhm.
left to be done. And that's easily like a couple hours of work just to kind of distill that information and put it into something meaningful. And I have a long history of always clicking send and then realizing, oh, I forgot that one important thing. So,
Yeah.
one of my very favorite workflow enhancers is I'm a big fan of Grammarly, and they have the
Mhm.
prompt of identify gaps. And so I run identify gaps, and it's like, you should probably mention the date. I'm like, yes, the
Oh,
date.
yeah.
Like, you should say who was there. Yes, yes, I should say that. Rather than, or, the classic, oh, I forgot to send the link in the email. Let me
Right.
send
Yeah.
another one 5 minutes later. Just lots of accelerators, but certainly nothing yet that's ready to do my job for me.
Right.
Yeah. That's I was gonna say that's where I really, feel like the term co-pilot comes in because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, you caught that gap for me, right? And you're helping me out now,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, both of you. That's really helpful to hear, actually, and it's fun to kind of just hearing both of you speak, I starting to identify some themes there. So, where AI is currently very helpful, which is automating tedium and filling skill gaps. And I think both of you identified and are using AI for that right now. So automating TDM of restructuring qualitative data, right? Roman, you talked about that quite a bit, as well as filling skill gaps, whether it has to do with doing workshop outlines or starting a draft or being told, hey, you're done, this is good enough, ship it, right? AI is very useful for those types of things now. And I actually want to, I am not typically in the business of endorsing products, but this one is free and nonprofit and doesn't ask you for money. So I will plug it, which is called Goblin Tools.
Oh,
Have either of you
yeah.
heard of this?
Huge fan. Yeah.
Oh, good, Roman. I'm so happy to hear that. For those of you not familiar, Goblin Tools is an AI-driven website that provides lots of small, focused tools for addressing kind of day-to-day challenges of working kind of in a white-collar environment or just the modern world. One of the things I find it most useful for is breaking down large, overwhelming tasks. It has an AI-driven tool that allows you to infinitely break down any task into as many steps as you want recursively and infinitely. And all of these tools are great, but you never want to just take what you get from them and run with them, right? A lot of them are useful for reacting to, right? So I might have trouble figuring out how to start a new usability study. And so I type into Goblin Tools, running usability study, and it would give me a list of, 10 subtasks there. And some of them might be useful and relevant, and some of them might not be. But I might start reacting to them and say, oh, I do need to do that. I definitely don't need to do that. Oh, I need more detail on this step. I don't need more detail on this step. And what do you know? I'm already starting to work on it, right? This is true of more general AI tools, chat tools like ChatGPT and whatnot, LLMs for draft generation, giving a tool an outline and asking it to write a 5-paragraph essay. It's not going to be good, but it's going to be something that you can react to and start to edit. As another part of Goblin Tools that I love is it has a number of tools that are focused on tone of voice. And Val, you mentioned this quite a bit of knowing how you come across in your communication and facilitating connection between people. It's super important as designers and UX practitioners. That's a large part of our job. Client interfacing, figuring out needs, figuring out how our designs and our products fit in with what people expect, or research products, or just dealing with stakeholders generally, right? Goblin Tools in particular has a lot of great things to check tones of voice, like, hey, how am I coming across with this email? I found that in many ways, the more an AI tool is focused and specific, the easier it is to work it into a workflow. And Goblin Tools is a great example. So highly recommend. Roman, I'm glad you already use it.
I'm so glad you brought them up because I really love their mission. What is it?
Yeah.
Tools for the neurospicy. So, as a parent of
Yes,
a
I
neurodiverse
self-identify with
teenager,
that. So
yeah,
yeah.
he's neurospicy for sure, and those are definitely the tools that are helpful for him. Like, okay, how is this going to read? Yeah, um,
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Like, I learned something new now. I'm going to go check out Goblin Tools. I'm definitely going to try to experiment with it and stay curious. And I think that's one of the things, right, in general, for people trying to get into AI and trying to figure it out for themselves, is just to be curious and check it out. And I think that's something that resonates with what you're teaching now, which is you're teaching a course at NNG on how to use AI tools and user experience
Mhm.
design.
The course is very focused on how UX practitioners and UX professionals can use AI in their existing UX work to just accelerate things and make things more efficient and increase their impact at work. It's not a course on building AI. We don't go into math at all. It's not a course on improving the UX and the interfaces of AI tools. I know we've all used plenty of AI tools that have horrendous interfaces. I'm looking at you, Midjourney. Even with their alpha interface, it's like not that much better, in my personal opinion. Anyway, It's not about that. It's about this kind of focused application of the current state of AI and applying it to our current workflows the best way that it can. As the AI field matures, NNG might decide that we're at a point where kind of the knowledge and the research is at a point and the products are at a point where we can start making solid recommendations. But right now, we're focused on that kind of focused application of day-to-day work. And a big focus of the course is on demystifying AI technology, helping people feel caught up. And then I like to provide lots of resources, lots of handouts, lots of great guides as part of that course. But I like to help people feel confident moving forward out of the course with staying up to date, right? And I'll share this here, which is I recommend that people do two things. They conduct small experiments and they have a news diet. I am not in favor of diets generally, but when it comes to information overload, especially in the AI world, I think it's necessary. So the small experiments part has to do with using AI in small ways, even it is important outside of the impact to our work to kind of keep abreast of how these tools are doing. And the best way to do that is by using them bit by bit. And applying a lot of the applications that we talk about in the course is a great way of doing those small experiments. So what I tend to recommend with the news diet is subscribe to a weekly newsletter that kind of gives updates on the field, on the industry once a week. And there's a couple that I recommend there. I really like Imaginative, a weekly newsletter. NNG's newsletter is quite good, although it's not specific to AI, it's UX. AI Brews is also pretty good, I've found. And there's some other ones as well out there. I also recommend, and this is kind of a relative recommendation, but subscribing to a skeptical AI newsletter and an optimistic AI newsletter. Those can mean different things to different people, but I recommend kind of being exposed to voices in the community that are excited and optimistic about the future of AI, and voices in the community that are providing evidence-backed, strong skepticism and criticism of the tech industry and the AI field in general, just to get exposure to different opinions and different feelings and different opinions about how the industry is doing. For optimistic AI, I keep returning to Ethan Mollick's newsletter, One Useful Thing. He's a professor at the Wharton School, and he will often kick the tires on updates on AI, and it's often from a more academic perspective and kind of a business school perspective. But I find it to be a great mix of empirical yet passionate work and writing on AI.
I appreciate the thoughts on the information diet because the steady stream of news, especially in the AI domain, can get overwhelming. And there is some legitimacy to feeling that, I guess, FOMO. I'm thinking of the Stanford study, I would say 2019, where they showed that AI compute is doubling every 3.4 months rather than Moore's law of 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
So the pace of, the doubling of the power of AI really is on a whole different scale than what we're used to in terms of that technological innovation and iteration.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely.
particularly for people who are involved in AI work, I think it feels like, this is a must. I got to stay right on the bleeding edge at all times. When in reality, ChatGPT's still pretty much doing what ChatGPT does. It's cool.
And it's tough to find the signal amongst the noise when there's just so much out there. And so choosing to kind of engage with it on our own terms is a way to feel informed, but not overwhelmed.
So we've established well that AI isn't coming for your user experience design job, maybe not for your creative work in general job, right? There's a lot of places, I think, in the arts and entertainment where people are very concerned about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it still just doesn't seem like it's ready to displace the human, but maybe in the near future be able to augment their ability. Um,
Yeah.
let's take a glance into the near future. How do you see things playing out over the next 3.4 months when AI doubles
Nice.
again?
I liked what you said about, um, yeah, things not changing too quickly, but needing to stay kind of aware just in case things do. There is kind of a step change, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I'm excited about a lot of things. I think some small predictions that I feel comfortable making is that the ways that we interact with the most powerful AI models are going to change over time. Knowing a little bit what's going inside the black box is very helpful, especially as the top layer or the interface layer changes over time. I do think that interacting with these tools will be easier to use.
Mm.
And part of that is my belief in that we will start to get our hands on improving these interfaces. So I'm optimistic about our ability as designers to improve the experience of interacting with these tools. I think we're already starting to see some promises of that. Midjourney's improvement, Adobe's integration of a lot of AI tools into their suites, Microsoft's push with Copilot being more integrated into their operating systems. I think that's very exciting. I'm I'm really encouraged by the activity in the open source community with AI models. I see examples of small, focused models all the time, vastly outperforming
Mm.
large general models on specific tasks like machine translation, or image recognition or things like that. I'm I am very bullish on the open source community. I think there's a potential for smaller, focused, even local models to have a really big impact everywhere, to kind of be seen as the Linux, a new kind of Linux open source approach to compute. I think that if AI products and models continue to be controlled largely by giant corporations and small numbers of actors, it will just recreate and accelerate the current kind of inequalities in society and a lot of the same dynamics with which we're frustrated in the tech industry. And I think AI, this new revolution in AI, has the potential to redistribute a lot of that kind of power and influence, especially in that open source world. So I'm bullish on that. There's also lots of very exciting applications of machine learning technology outside of the LLM chatbot. I love looking from afar at the field of robotics. A lot of amazing work that's been done on establishing foundational models for robots interacting with the physical world, combining that with large language model technology to create emergent and flexible behavior. The ability to offset extremely difficult work in warehousing or in B2B practices to humanoid, more specialized robotics is really exciting for me. So, those are some of the things that make me really excited about the future, specifically with applying for AI models. There's a lot of potential negative impacts and costs associated with the future of AI, but there's a lot of possibilities, and the directions are almost limitless, and we have a lot of choice. So I think we can put our money and our effort and our time behind the things that will lead to a more equitable, more equal society with this technology.
Thank you, Caleb, for coming onto the show and sharing your thoughts with us. This has been a fascinating conversation. Where can people find you online to continue this discussion?
I'm almost everywhere. You can find me at nnengroup.com, where I teach and publish articles and videos. My personal website is calebsponheim.com. I am on Blue Sky, trying to get off Twitter. But anyone can email me at caleb@nnengroup.com or connect with me on LinkedIn and continue this conversation.
And when is your next class kicking off?
I tend to teach the AI course every month. It's updating all of the time. Feel free to visit nnengroup.com, look for Practical AI for UX professionals to see when I'm teaching it next. You're always welcome. And there's plenty of free and accessible resources on nnengroup.com about artificial intelligence, not just from me, but from many of my smart colleagues at NNG as well.
I love that. You guys are very generous with your resources.
We love that. We wouldn't exist without the community of UX professionals around there, and it's very important that we all work together to make this industry better because we know it needs it.
All right, so that's a wrap for this episode of Socially Conscious AI Podcast with our amazing guest, Dr. Caleb Sponheim. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and why not share the show with someone who could benefit from hearing this conversation. For Valencio Cardoso, I'm Roman Burkott. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious.